Arrival of the Predator. The Galactic Council chamber was alive with tension as delegates from dozens of species crowded into the vast arena. The ceiling arched high above, shimmering with panels of artificial starlight, while the floor pulsed faintly with energy fields that hummed like distant thunder. Every species in attendance knew why they had been called here, though few admitted it openly. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage far too quickly for many civilizations' comfort. They were newcomers, fragile by most standards, short-lived compared to the ancient races that ruled the stars, and yet in only a handful of years they had begun pushing into trade routes, winning battles they were never expected to survive, and refusing to bow to the established empires. The council had decided that this meeting would send a message. The Emperor of the Zithari, a reptilian giant with scales that gleamed like wet stone, raised one clawed hand for silence. His voice, rough as grinding stone, carried across the chamber. The humans think themselves strong. They think themselves fearless. Today they will see what true strength looks like. Today they will learn their place. At his signal, the great gates at the far end of the chamber rumbled open. The air grew heavy with the sound of massive chains dragging against reinforced metal. A scent of ozone and musk filled the hall, sharp and primal, making many alien delegates recoil instinctively. From the shadows beyond the gates came the council's chosen weapon, the beast they called the Apex Warden. It was taller than a war mech, its body layered with muscle and plated hide that shimmered in colors shifting from black to crimson. Its claws carved grooves into the steel floor as it stepped forward. Rows of teeth like crystalline daggers filled its open jaws, and its eyes glowed with a deep, predatory gold. The Apex Warden was no ordinary animal. It had been bred across generations of conquest, designed by the Zithari and their allies to be a living terror. On countless worlds, its kind had been released to break the spirit of rebellious species, to show them that resistance was futile, to remind them that the galaxy belonged to the strong. Never once had it failed. Gasps echoed through the chamber as the predator roared, a sound so deep it rattled the bones of everyone present. Some delegates covered their ears, others flinched back in their seats, but the humans did not move. They stood together in a small cluster near the center of the floor, their simple uniforms a stark contrast to the jeweled robes and ornate armor of the other species. They had not brought weapons. They had not brought war machines. Only their calm expressions and steady eyes faced the beast that had ended civilizations. The Apex Warden dragged its chains forward, its roar shaking the floor as sparks jumped from its claws against the reinforced steel. The air itself seemed to shiver. The council erupted in mocking laughter. "Look at them," hissed the envoy of the Shalar Dominion, his spines quivering with delight. "They do not even run. Do they not know fear?" Another alien joined in, her voice sharp and mocking. "Perhaps they are frozen, like prey before the strike. Soon we shall see their screams." Yet the humans remained still. Their leader, a tall man with gray at his temples and steady blue eyes, simply folded his hands behind his back as though he were watching a curious display at a zoo. The Apex Warden growled low, its massive head swaying back and forth as it sniffed the air. Then with terrifying speed it lunged forward, chains clanging as it tested the limits of its bonds. The floor shook with the impact and alien delegates cried out in panic. But the humans did not flinch. The beast froze, its golden eyes locked onto the humans. For a long moment, silence fell across the chamber. The council members leaned forward, waiting for blood. But what they saw instead was hesitation. The Apex Warden, a predator that had slaughtered armies, did not strike. Its jaws remained open, its breath steaming in the cold air, but it did not advance further. Something in the way the humans stood, calm and unwavering, held it back. The council did not yet understand what was happening, but unease stirred among them. The laughter faltered, replaced by mutters and frowns. The Apex Warden roared again, louder, more desperate, but the humans still did not move. Their leader's gaze remained locked with the creatures, and in that silence an unspoken message hung heavy in the air. The predator had been unleashed to terrify humanity. Instead, it seemed as though the predator itself was the one uncertain, and for the first time, a sliver of doubt crept into the council's hearts. The beast's roar, humanity's silence. The chamber trembled as the Apex Warden's roar thundered again, louder this time, echoing against the walls until it sounded like the fury of 1,000 storms. Delegates clutched their seats, many struggling not to retreat. for the predator was displaying the kind of raw dominance that had broken countless species before. It smashed its chained limbs against the reinforced floor, sparks flashing as claws scraped metal, each blow a reminder that this creature could end any life before it with little effort. The alien representatives had expected the humans to finally collapse in fear, to beg for mercy or at least show some weakness, but still they stood unmoving. Their silence was more terrifying than screams, and though the council would not yet admit it, the balance in the chamber was beginning to shift. The leader of the humans remained at the front of his group, his posture steady, his hands clasped behind his back as though this was not a scene of mortal danger, but a simple performance meant to be observed with calm curiosity. The others behind him, men and women of Earth dressed in simple uniforms, mirrored his composure. Not one step was taken backward. Not one glance betrayed panic. Where other species would tremble under the weight of the predator's aura, the humans instead radiated a quiet stillness that unsettled even the most battle-hardened council members. The apex warden lifted its massive head and let out a guttural growl, its golden eyes fixed upon the human leader. It lowered its body, muscles coiled, and with shocking speed it lunged again, straining against the chains until the heavy links glowed red from the stress. The floor cracked under its weight, sending shudders up through the chamber, and many alien dignitaries screamed or stumbled back from their seats. But the humans remained rooted where they stood. The leader did not even blink. His gaze never broke from the glowing eyes of the beast. A murmur ran through the council. The Zethari Emperor who had orchestrated this display hissed in irritation. His claws dug into the armrest of his throne. Why do they not cower, he demanded, his voice dripping with fury. Why do they not fall to their knees? The Shalar envoy leaned forward, his spines twitching nervously now. Perhaps their minds are broken, he suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. Even he could see that this was not the vacant stare of prey, but something far more deliberate. The apex warden roared once more, but this roar was different. It was not the triumphant call of a predator about to kill. It was uncertain, almost frustrated, as if the very instincts that guided its existence were being challenged. It stomped its massive limbs, tearing gouges into the floor, yet it hesitated to close the distance. The human leader finally stepped forward. The sound of his boots against the floor echoed in the silence that followed, each step steady and unhurried. The audience held its breath, expecting blood at any moment, but the man continued until he stood a few paces from the predator. Gasps erupted across the chamber. No one had ever dared approach the apex warden so closely without weapons or armor. Some shouted warnings, others cried out that he was a fool about to be devoured. The Emperor himself laughed cruelly, convinced that at last humanity would be put in its place. But that laughter began to falter as the human raised his chin and looked straight into the glowing eyes of the beast. The apex warden froze. Its breath came in heavy, steaming gusts that rolled over the human like waves of fire, yet he did not step back. Instead, the creature's body stiffened, the tension in its muscles visible even beneath its plated hide. Slowly, its head tilted downward, just slightly, but enough for every watching eye to see. The predator was not preparing to strike. It was hesitating. Whispers filled the chamber, first confused, then frightened. "Impossible," muttered one delegate. "It should have killed him already." Another hissed in disbelief. "The apex warden does not wait. It does not falter." Yet here it was, pausing before a human who should have been no more than fragile prey. The leader of the humans did not speak, but his silence carried more weight than 1,000 words. The apex warden growled again, softer this time, a sound that rumbled like distant thunder. Then, astonishing everyone present, it shifted its posture, lowering its massive head closer to the floor. It was not yet submission, not yet a bow, but it was something no one had ever witnessed before. The Zethari Emperor rose to his feet, his eyes wide with rage. "Trickery," he roared. "Some kind of hidden weapon. No beast of ours would falter before them." His voice shook the chamber, but even he could not hide the unease in his tone. The human leader stood calmly, his expression unchanged, as if he had expected this outcome all along. His people behind him remained silent, their eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before them. The apex warden's golden gaze stayed locked on the human, no longer burning with hunger but with something far older and more instinctive, something buried deep in the blood of predators across the galaxy. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. The council had gathered to humiliate humanity, to break them in front of the galaxy. Instead, they now watched the beginnings of something that unsettled even their most hardened hearts. The Apex Warden had not claimed a victim. It had paused, and in that pause the seeds of doubt were planted in every alien mind. And as the humans stood unbroken, the galaxy's laughter began to fade, the first sign of submission. The air inside the council chamber grew heavy and tense as the Apex Warden remained locked in place before the humans. Its chains rattled with each breath, a low metallic echo that mingled with the nervous murmurs of the delegates. The beast had been bred to terrify and destroy, its every instinct sharpened over generations of conquest. Yet now it stood in hesitation, its golden eyes fixed on a single human. The silence stretched on, unbearable for many of the aliens who had come expecting a spectacle of blood and fear. Instead, they were witnessing something that defied every law of nature they believed they understood. The human leader's eyes remained unblinking as he faced the beast. His posture was steady, his hands still folded calmly behind his back. He took one more step forward, a deliberate move that seemed to slice through the suffocating quiet. The Apex Warden's head lowered fractionally, and though its massive body still vibrated with restrained power, there was no strike, no killing blow. It was a pause that felt unnatural, an interruption in a cycle that had always ended in death. The delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their voices rising into whispers of disbelief. "This cannot be," hissed an envoy from the Krathi, his multiple eyes blinking furiously. "The Warden never falters, never." Another leaned toward him, her mandibles clicking nervously. "Then explain what we are seeing. Explain why it lowers its head before prey." The Zethari Emperor slammed a clawed fist against his throne, his anger sharp enough to silence the chamber for a heartbeat. "It is a trick," he thundered, his scaled chest rising and falling in fury. "These humans have hidden technology, some form of control, a device we have not seen." But even as he spoke, his words rang hollow. Everyone could see the truth for themselves. The Apex Warden's instincts were too old, too primal to be swayed by hidden machines. Its hesitation was not the result of trickery. It was instinct, something buried deep in the core of its predatory nature, something that recognized in these humans a presence it had never known before. The human leader finally lifted his hand. Slowly, deliberately, he extended it toward the massive creature. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Some shouted in alarm, certain that the beast would seize the moment to tear the fragile man apart. Yet the Apex Warden did not strike. Instead, it lowered its great head further, the glow in its golden eyes dimming as though the fire within had bent to another flame. The human's hand came to rest against the thick hide of the predator's snout. The hall erupted in cries of shock, outrage, and fear. The impossible had happened before their eyes. The predator let out a deep, rumbling sound, not of fury but of something closer to acknowledgement. It was a sound no one had ever heard from the Apex Warden, a sound that seemed almost respectful. The humans behind their leader exchanged quiet glances but remained calm, as if this moment had been inevitable. The council's delegates, however, were thrown into chaos. Some shouted accusations, others demanded explanations. The Shalar envoy's spines flattened against his back in terror as he whispered, "If it bows to them, what does that make us?" His words hung heavy in the chamber, echoing the thought burning in every alien mind. The Zethari Emperor roared again, though this time there was no laughter in his voice, only desperation. "It is nothing but an animal," he spat, though his eyes betrayed his unease. "Do not be fooled by its hesitation." But the Apex Warden continued to bow its head, pressing gently against the human's hand. For a predator bred to dominate, to conquer, to kill without mercy, this was no hesitation. This was submission. The human leader spoke for the first time, his voice steady and calm, carrying through the chamber without the aid of amplification. "You brought your strongest to intimidate us. But strength does not bow to weakness. It only bows to greater strength." His words struck like thunder. Shock rippled through the crowd. No one dared respond at first, their voices stolen by the undeniable truth of what they were seeing. The predator had made its choice, not through trickery, not through machines, but through instinct that could not be denied. It had looked upon humanity and seen not prey, not equals, but something higher. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted, some demanding the humans be expelled, others demanding they be studied, others insisting that they must be destroyed before the truth spread further. Yet beneath all the noise, the predator remained still, its massive frame lowered at the feet of the humans. Its golden eyes no longer burned with the hunger of a beast unleashed, but with recognition of a new master. And as the galaxy's rulers shouted over one another in fear and disbelief, humanity stood calm and silent, letting the sight speak for itself. The Apex Warden had chosen, and the galaxy would never look at them the same again. Alien panic and human calm. The council chamber was a storm of voices and fear as the Apex Warden kept its massive head lowered before the humans. The Predator's chains dragged against the floor, rattling in the silence between roars of argument from the alien delegates. It was a sight that none of them had ever imagined, and the more they tried to deny what their eyes showed them, the more the truth pressed down upon them like a crushing weight. The beast that had been unleashed to humiliate humanity had instead bowed, and now the rulers of countless systems were forced to face the possibility that everything they believed about dominance and fear had been wrong. Some delegates shouted for immediate action. A Krathi commander leapt from his seat, his voice shrill with desperation as he demanded that the humans be arrested and executed on the spot before their influence could spread further. Across the chamber, a Shalar dignitary trembled as he hissed that no chains could hold back creatures like these if even the Apex Warden bent to them. The panic was contagious, running through the rows of aliens like wildfire, feeding on their uncertainty and fear. Yet in the middle of the storm, the humans stood as still as stone. Their leader kept his hand resting calmly against the hide of the beast, his eyes fixed on the council with quiet defiance. He did not need to speak again. His silence carried the weight of an unshakable truth, and the sight of the Predator kneeling beside him was proof enough that humanity was no longer to be dismissed as prey. The Zethari Emperor tried to regain control of the chamber. He slammed his clawed fist against the arm of his throne, his scales catching the artificial light with every movement. His voice roared above the din, commanding silence from the lesser delegates. "This is not what it seems," he bellowed, his tone carrying anger and fear alike. "The humans have done something to it. This is an illusion. It must be." But his words rang hollow even to those loyal to him. They could see the Predator's eyes, the steady golden glow no longer wild with hunger but calm and focused. It was not the look of a beast enslaved by trickery. It was the look of recognition, the look of a predator acknowledging another. The murmurs returned, quieter now but filled with dread. Some delegates whispered that the humans were cursed. Others whispered that they were blessed. All of them knew that something had shifted, and none of them knew how to stop it. The Shalar envoy leaned toward the Emperor, his voice urgent and frightened. "If the Apex Warden bows to them, what do our armies matter? What does our power matter? If every predator sees them as higher, then we are already defeated before the war begins." His words made the Emperor's face twist with rage, but he had no answer, for even he could feel the weight of the truth pressing down upon him. The human delegation remained calm through it all. Their stillness was like a blade cutting through the chaos, and the more the aliens shouted and panicked, the more powerful the humans appeared. They were no longer just a small band of newcomers to the galaxy. They were a force that did not need weapons or threats. Their very presence had bent the strongest predator known to the Council. A low growl came from the Apex Warden, not of anger but of warning, and the chamber fell silent again. The beast's golden eyes scanned the room, focusing on the aliens who shouted the loudest. Those who met its gaze quickly looked away, their courage failing before its silent judgment. Then its eyes returned to the humans, and its body lowered further as if to reaffirm its choice. The gesture silenced even the Emperor's fury for a moment, for there was no denying what they were seeing. Whispers spread once more, softer this time as delegates spoke of what this meant for the balance of the galaxy. If humanity could inspire submission in the Apex Warden, what would happen when they spread further into the stars? Would other predators bow to them as well? Would other species, long considered weak, rally behind them? Already the seeds of fear and doubt had been planted, and already they were beginning to grow. The humans did not move, and they did not smile. Their calm was more terrifying than any display of violence could have been. They had no need to boast or threaten. The sight of the Apex Warden kneeling at their feet had already reshaped the galaxy in the minds of those who watched. In that moment, the Council chamber no longer belonged to the Zethari Emperor or to the ancient empires that had ruled for millennia. It belonged to the humans who had done nothing but stand firm. It belonged to the predator that had chosen to lower its head in submission. And though the aliens tried to cling to denial, though they tried to drown their fear in shouts and accusations, deep within their hearts they all knew the same thing. The age of humanity had begun, and no amount of rage or disbelief could stop it from spreading. The revelation of Deathworld biology. The chamber no longer sounded like a gathering of rulers, but like a pit of frightened creatures, their voices rising and falling with anger and fear, as the image of the apex warden kneeling refused to fade from their minds. Some still shouted about trickery, others demanded blood, and others whispered about omens. But beneath it all there was a single truth they could not escape. The predator had not been defeated by weapons or chains or machines. It had bowed by instinct, and that instinct carried more weight than all the council's words. The humans stood calm at the center of the chaos, their leader still resting his hand on the beast as though he were touching an old companion. At last, one of the scientists from the Vayari delegation rose from his seat. His slender frame shook, his long silver tendrils twitching nervously, but his voice carried enough strength to silence the worst of the shouting. "We must consider what has happened with reason," he said, his eyes darting from the humans to the apex warden. "This is not sorcery. It is not a machine. It is biology." The word hung in the air, sharp and heavy, and the chamber leaned in to hear more. The scientist swallowed, his throat ridges trembling, before he continued. "The apex warden does not obey weakness. It only obeys strength. Its instincts are carved deep into its bloodline, older than most of our histories. If it sees strength in the humans, then we must ask why, and the answer is in the world they come from." He paused, gathering his courage as the Emperor glared at him with fury. "Earth is not like our worlds. It is what we call a death world." Gasps filled the chamber. The word was spoken rarely and only in hushed tones, for death worlds were planets so violent and hostile that survival itself was a constant battle. Most intelligent life never rose from such places, and when it did, it was often crushed by its own brutal environment before it could ever reach the stars. That humans had not only survived but thrived on such a world was already a mystery, but now it had become a revelation that explained everything they were witnessing. The scientist pressed on despite the tension. "On their world, gravity is heavy, their air is thick, their beasts are fierce beyond reason. Poison, hunger, storms, predators, diseases, every day on Earth is a trial of survival. Their ancestors rose not in safety, but in endless danger, and so danger became their teacher. Their bodies are forged by the same forces that make the apex warden what it is, but their minds have mastered it. They are predators that learned not only to kill but to think. That is what the apex warden recognizes. It sees not prey but kin, and not equal kin but a greater predator than itself." The silence after his words was heavier than any roar. Delegates shifted uncomfortably, some looking at the humans with fresh dread, others refusing to meet their eyes at all. The idea that humanity was not fragile but something more dangerous than the galaxy had ever known gnawed at their minds like an invisible claw. The Emperor rose again, his voice raw with fury. "Lies," he thundered, though his trembling claws betrayed his fear. "You speak lies to excuse this insult. They are frail, their lifespans are short, their numbers small. They are nothing before us." But even as he shouted, the truth could not be denied. The humans had not moved, had not threatened, had not needed to raise a weapon, and yet the strongest predator in the galaxy bowed at their feet. The sight stood as proof stronger than any speech or denial. The whispers grew again, spreading through the chamber like a tide. "Deathworlders," they murmured. "Children of chaos, born of fury." The human leader finally broke his silence. His voice was steady, not loud, but it carried into every corner of the hall. "You wanted to remind us of our place. You brought your greatest beast to show us fear, and in doing so you reminded yourselves of ours. We do not bow because we cannot. We were born where only strength survives." His words struck deeper than any blade, and not one alien could muster a response. The apex warden shifted beside him, a low growl rumbling from its chest that sounded less like a threat and more like agreement. It lowered its head further, a gesture that left no room for doubt. This was not hesitation, not confusion, but recognition. The predator had chosen, and its choice echoed through the hearts of all who witnessed it. For the first time in the Council's long history, the galaxy's rulers realized that humanity was not a mistake to be corrected or a challenge to be mocked. Humanity was a storm born on a death world, and the galaxy had only just begun to feel its first winds. turning fear into power. The council chamber was no longer a place of order or dignity, but a battlefield of voices where panic clashed with anger and desperation. The revelation of humanity's death world origin had spread through the delegates like a fire that could not be smothered. Some demanded that humanity be destroyed before their strength grew any further. Others shouted for alliances to be made before it was too late, while others simply sat in silence, their minds breaking under the weight of a truth they had spent their lives denying. In the center of it all, the humans remained silent and calm, their posture firm, their eyes steady, their leader still resting his hand against the bowed head of the apex warden. Every action the humans took, or rather every action they did not take, only fueled the storm around them. Their silence was more powerful than threats. Their calm was more terrifying than rage. The predator at their feet was a symbol the galaxy could not ignore, and every alien in the chamber knew it. The more the council panicked, the more it became clear that the humans were no longer outsiders to be mocked, but a force to be reckoned with. The Zithari Emperor rose again, his voice raw with fury, yet beneath it trembled the edges of fear. "You see now what must be done," he roared, his claws tearing into the armrest of his throne. "They must be destroyed before their shadow spreads across the stars. If we allow them to live, then everything we have built will fall. This is not a question of pride. It is survival." His words found echoes in the voices of other fearful leaders, and a chorus of calls for extermination filled the chamber. Yet for every voice demanding humanity's destruction, there was another voice rising in hesitation, or even in support of the humans. A representative from the Vayari leaned forward, his silver tendrils trembling as he spoke. "If the apex warden bows to them, then perhaps we are better as allies than enemies. If Earth is a death world, then imagine what their soldiers could do if they stood beside us instead of against us." His words stirred unease, but also reluctant agreement from others who had seen enough wars to know that fighting such a species might doom them all. The chamber divided quickly, one half demanding blood and the other whispering of treaties and alliances. The chaos grew so thick it seemed the chamber itself would shatter under the noise. But the humans did not raise their voices. They stood in silence, their leader finally stepping forward with slow, deliberate steps that cut through the shouting like a blade. When he spoke, his words were not loud, but they carried with a force that silenced every delegate who heard them. "We did not come here to threaten you," he said, his gaze sweeping across the chamber. "We did not come here to conquer you or to enslave you. You called us here to humiliate us, to remind us of our place, but what you have seen today is not our doing. You brought your beast and your beast chose. That is not trickery, that is truth. We are not here to bow, but we are not here to demand you bow either. We are here to show you that humanity will walk its own path, and that path will not be dictated by fear." The words struck like hammers into the hearts of the delegates. Some hissed in outrage. Others sat in stunned silence, but none could deny that the humans were no longer speaking as guests or supplicants. They were speaking as equals, perhaps even as leaders, and their calmness only sharpened the weight of their message. The apex warden growled again, lowering its body further until its massive frame lay almost completely against the floor. The predator, once the council's greatest symbol of fear, now looked more like a guardian standing beside the humans. Every alien eye in the chamber saw the gesture and understood its meaning. The predator had made its choice final. Fear turned into power in that moment. Not power claimed by weapons or armies, but power born from the recognition of something greater than all the chains and walls the council had built to keep order. Humanity had stepped into the galaxy as a question, and now they stood as an answer. The empires that had laughed at them now faced the choice of bowing to truth or breaking against it. The Emperor roared again, demanding that the humans be destroyed, but fewer voices joined him this time. The seeds of doubt had grown too deep. Some whispered that it was too late to destroy them. Others whispered that destroying them would be suicide, for if one beast could kneel, what other forces might already feel their presence? And some whispered the most dangerous thought of all, that perhaps the galaxy needed them. The humans said no more. They did not need to. Their silence, their calm, and the predator at their side spoke louder than any words. The chamber that had once been filled with mocking laughter now trembled with fear and awe, and for the first time in millennia, the balance of galactic power shifted before the eyes of every ruler. The predator's choice, the galaxy's future. The chamber was silent except for the heavy breaths of the Apex Warden as it lay pressed against the floor, its massive body curled beside the humans like a guardian resting at the feet of its master. Every alien in the chamber stared at the sight with wide eyes, some in awe, some in terror, and some in quiet resignation. What they had intended as a spectacle to break humanity had turned into a spectacle that broke them instead. The strongest predator in the galaxy had chosen its place, and it was not at the feet of the Zithari Emperor or the Ancient Council. It was at the feet of humanity. The Zithari Emperor could not accept it. He rose from his throne with fury burning in his scaled eyes, his voice booming with rage that carried through the chamber. This is an insult. This is betrayal. You cannot believe that this beast has chosen freely. You cannot believe that these fragile creatures are stronger than us. We must destroy them now or everything we have built will crumble. His words thundered across the room, but the echo that returned to him was not support. It was silence, and in that silence he saw his empire beginning to lose its grip. A delegate from the Veyari stood slowly, his tendrils quivering as he spoke. Perhaps it is not betrayal. Perhaps it is revelation. We have seen the Warden kill. We have seen it tear through armies. We have seen it destroy empires. Never once has it faltered. Never once has it bowed. But today it bowed to them, and we must ask why. The answer is simple. We are not the apex we thought ourselves to be. Humanity is. The words spread through the chamber like ripples on water. Others began to rise, voices filled with fear and uncertainty. A Shalaran voice hissed that to fight the humans now would be madness. For if even the Apex Warden acknowledged them, then every predator in the galaxy might follow. A Krathi warrior grumbled that perhaps allying with the humans would be safer than trying to destroy them. The chamber divided again, but this time the voices calling for extermination were drowned by the voices of caution, of fear and of reluctant respect. The human leader stood silently as they argued, his people still calm behind him, the predator still kneeling at his side. He did not need to fight for attention, for every pair of eyes in the chamber returned to him again and again, waiting for his reaction, waiting for his judgment. At last he stepped forward, his boots echoing across the chamber floor, and when he spoke his voice was calm but carried the weight of inevitability. You brought us here to make us bow. You brought your greatest predator to remind us of our place, but it has shown you the truth. We are not prey. We are not weak. We are not here to kneel. We are here to stand, and we will stand whether you wish it or not. His gaze swept across the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate, even the Emperor. We do not seek to conquer you, but know this. We will not be conquered either. The predator at our side is proof not of your strength but of ours. The galaxy will change, and it will change with or without your permission. The silence that followed was absolute. The Emperor tried once more to rally his supporters, but fewer voices joined him now. The sight of the Warden, the calm words of the human, and the weight of the truth pressed too heavily against their hearts. Slowly, some of the delegates lowered their heads in acknowledgement, not quite in submission, but in recognition of the new order taking shape. Others remained frozen, unwilling to bow but unable to defy what they had seen. And a few, trembling with fear, truly bowed, their gestures small but undeniable. The Apex Warden rumbled deep in its chest, a sound that filled the chamber like thunder, and then it shifted its great body until it lay fully at the human's feet. Its golden eyes closed not in defeat but in peace, as though it had finally found what it had been searching for all its life. The gesture was unmistakable. The predator had not only hesitated, not only bowed, but fully submitted, and with that act, the chamber broke. Some delegates cried out in despair, some in fury, and some in awe, but none could deny the truth any longer. Humanity had not just survived the trial. Humanity had been crowned by the very beast meant to destroy them. The galaxy trembled with the knowledge that a new apex had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The human leader turned, his people following him as he walked toward the great doors of the chamber. He did not look back, for there was no need. Behind him, the Apex Warden rose, its chains snapping as though they were nothing, and it followed at his side like a guardian bound not by force but by choice. The sight silenced the chamber once more, for even those who still clung to their denial could not ignore the reality walking before them. As the doors opened and the humans stepped into the starlit halls beyond, the galaxy's rulers remained frozen in their seats. They had tried to intimidate Earth. They had tried to humiliate humanity. Instead, they had revealed to all the galaxy that the era of human dominance had begun. And as the Predator walked calmly beside its chosen masters, the future of every star in the Council's domain shifted forever. The galaxy's future, the Council chamber, felt more like a tomb than a hall of power as silence settled over the rows of alien rulers. The Apex Warden lay stretched on the floor, its golden eyes half closed, its massive body lowered as though it had finally recognized the truth that none of the delegates wanted to face. The beast that had shattered armies and broken empires had bowed before the humans, and no words of denial could erase the weight of what everyone had seen. The Zithari Emperor clawed at his throne with fury, his voice cracking as he shouted for war, for extermination, for vengeance, but his calls no longer rang with authority. His supporters glanced away, their faces twisted with unease, their voices faltering before they could echo his rage. What was the worth of threats when the strongest predator in the galaxy had already made its choice? What was the worth of denial when instinct itself had declared humanity the apex? One by one, delegates began to speak, some in whispers, some with trembling voices, some with reluctant courage. They spoke of alliances, of treaties, of fear, and of survival. They spoke of how humanity could not be contained, how their death-world nature had shaped them into something more dangerous than any empire could have predicted. And as they spoke, the shape of the galaxy itself seemed to shift, the balance of power sliding from the hands of the old rulers into the grasp of the newcomers who had never bowed. The human leader stood calm at the center of it all, his people silent behind him, the Apex Warden lying obediently at his side. He spoke not with arrogance but with certainty, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. He reminded them that humanity had not come to conquer, that they had not come to kneel either, that they would walk their own path with or without the Council's blessing. His words were simple, yet they struck deeper than any weapon, for everyone knew they were true. The Predator shifted again, pressing its great head gently against the human side, a gesture of loyalty so clear that it silenced even the Emperor. The chains that had bound it cracked and fell to the floor, no longer strong enough to hold a creature that had chosen its master. The sight of it rising and following the humans toward the chamber doors was burned into every mind, a symbol of a new age that none of them had wanted, but all of them now had to face. As the humans walked away, the Predator followed with steady steps, its golden eyes scanning the chamber with silent warning. None dared move against them, none dared speak against them. The Council that had once laughed at Earth now sat frozen, their power shaken, their future uncertain. For in their arrogance they had revealed the truth to themselves and to the galaxy. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was the storm that even their greatest predator could not resist. And as the doors closed behind the humans and their new guardian, a single truth settled upon the galaxy with finality. The age of humanity had begun, and there would be no turning back. The end.